In the pantheon of American culture, there's no character more globally recognizable than Superman. After making his comic debut in 1938, Clark Kent quickly jumped to radio, television, the movies, and beyond, practically in a single bound. For almost 90 years, he's been a symbol of goodness and the prototype for the modern superhero. He's also changed and evolved through decades of storytelling, while a host of actors have portrayed the Man of Steel on screen, begging the question, which one of them played Superman best? Superman first made it to the real world at the World's Fair in 1940, when actor Ray Middleton became the first person to play him for a Superman Day celebration. For as long as there's been a Superman, he's had a simple formula: a cape, tights, boots, the iconic S, and those strongman trunks, which would eventually become optional. But more importantly, the character arrived fully formed and bloomed during World War II as a paragon of truth and justice with a colorful supporting cast. As an alien raised by a kindly Midwestern couple, Superman is all about going above and beyond to do the right thing, and the actors who've played him have captured that ethos to different degrees. With apologies to Ray Middleton and in-person Supermen everywhere, for this ranking we're focusing on the lead actors of major live-action movies and TV shows. We're also limiting it to the character of Superman, so that means no younger versions of the character and no shows titled Superboy. Sorry, Joaquin Phoenix. And it also means no video games or cartoons either, otherwise, we'd be here all day.
Can't get much worse than this.
We're also limiting this list to official adaptations, so no unlicensed Turkish Superman Returns or the many versions out of India which could fill up their own video. However, we will have a couple of honorable mentions along the way who don't quite fit the criteria, but we couldn't have this conversation without them. The question of what makes a great Man of Steel is a tough one, but the answer usually comes down to two broad categories: the actors themselves and the story or adaptations they're a part of. So, with that in mind, take our hand and join us as we count down from the actors we think missed the mark all the way to the definitive Superman. Superman has been played by a number of great performers, but we'd be lying if we said that he was a hit every single time. Lois and Clark ran for 4 seasons in the early 90s, and while it combined romance and journalism with Villains of the Week, it was also entirely of its era. Which is to say, the era of Beverly Hills 90210 and Melrose Place. On the surface, it has all the elements of a Superman story, but it seemed far more interested in creating a new 90s heartthrob than a Man of Steel, down to the character's hairstyle.
What do you think?
Well, one thing's for sure, nobody's gonna be looking at your face.
As Superman, Dean Cain has an unfortunately limited range, with occasionally stilted delivery. He says all the right things.
I like your costume.
Thank you. My mother made it for me.
But whether or not he's convincing is another matter.
Who are you?
I'm a friend.
A defining trait of a good Superman performance is the distinction between Superman and Clark Kent, and while Cain technically has that, it's not exactly a performance concerned with fidelity. His Clark Kent is suave and fast-talking, and occasionally charming.
Come on in.
While his Superman is straightforward and stern, but without much depth or authority.
Well, I think what you need is a little attitude adjustment.
And there's something awkward about his stature, like he's never quite comfortable in the suit, almost like the two personas are flipped.
Astonishing debut, Superman. Well, haven't you heard? That's what they're calling you. It's international news.
Kane's version of Clark says he wants to fit in, but there's really nothing stopping him from being a normal guy, at least by the standards of 90s TV dramas. In these moments of attempted emotion, the music tends to do the heavy lifting.
I don't fit in.
Now, Lois and Clark isn't a terrible show by any stretch. In fact, Terry Hatcher makes for an ambitious and accomplished Lois Lane.
Oh, come on, you guys are missing out things here.
But when it comes to portraying the Man of Steel, it doesn't really live up to what came before it, despite Cain claiming to have based his version of Clark on our next entry. The most famous of the early Supermen, George Reeves, no relation to Christopher Reeve, they spell it differently, played the character for nearly a decade, across the B-movie Superman and the Mole Men and the long-running TV series Adventures of Superman.
Look, up in the sky, it's a bird!
It's a plane!
It's Superman!
But maybe Dean Cain should have sought inspiration for his Clark Kent elsewhere. Reeves was an accomplished actor, having appeared in Best Picture winner Gone with the Wind, but his version of Clark wasn't particularly different from his Superman. Despite the show's opening narration, Superman, who can change the course of mighty rivers, bend steel in his bare hands, and who, disguised as Clark Kent, a mild-mannered reporter for a great metropolitan newspaper. But when it comes to Superman, Reeves, who was 38 when he first played the part, was exactly what the series called for. He was an older, barrel-chested actor in the vein of Western superstar and American mythmaker John Wayne, and his iconic stature still remains a part of the character's appearance today, like when he's drawn by comic artist Alex Ross. The series began when the US had rising tensions with the USSR, so part of his mission was to instill a sense of patriotism in its viewers. And there was also a move by the US Treasury Department to get Superman to convince people to invest in stamps and savings bonds. For better or worse, these government efforts weren't usually reflected in the overall plot, except for one episode. The series mostly saw Superman tackling regular, everyday criminals, a far cry from the wacky Silver Age antics in the comics at the time. While the movie, which was folded into the show, revolved around Superman trying to stop people from discriminating against subterranean beings with a calm sense of authority.
You're not going to shoot those little creatures.
The show's decade-long run happened at a significant time. It saw the character transition to color, and it helped cause an explosion in mainstream popularity, with The Man of Steel even crossing over with I Love Lucy. For several generations, Reeves was the definitive Superman, a role he played well into his 40s until his tragic demise. Which brings us to our first honorable mention. To date, no actor has played both Batman and Superman, but Ben Affleck comes close, since he actually played George Reeves in the 2006 mystery movie Hollywoodland, which treats the actor's possible suicide as a murder.
Faster than a speeding bullet?
Despite his unhappiness with the role at times, Reeves often stayed in character as the Man of Steel, especially around children, which is something Affleck's version of the beloved actor gets absolutely right.
Hey, Superman!
Well, hello there, young man. What's your name?
Something must have been in the water in 2006, because Hollywoodland wasn't the only movie that year filled with nostalgia for an older Superman. Made as an homage to the Richard Donner original, Bryan Singer's Superman Returns sees the Man of Steel returning to the big screen after a 22-year absence, in a story where he comes back to Earth after 5 years away.
Well, you're back, and everyone seems to be pretty happy about it.
Now, whether Brandon Routh is playing the same version as Christopher Reeve is up to your interpretation, but there's no avoiding the comparisons, given Reeve's influence on the character. More on that in a bit. Routh has an incredible gentleness about him, and he embodies both the wistful farm boy and the mild-mannered reporter part of Clark Kent to a T, bumbling his way through scenes in a way that both feels like an act and like he's channeling who Clark truly is.
Oh, it looks delicious.
As Superman, he has this otherworldly quality to him that makes him feel truly like an alien removed from humanity, but maybe that doesn't quite suit this interpretation.
It lacks that human touch.
It's wonderful to see him perform feats of strength, but his lumbering appearance might be a little too polished. Between the sleek suit, his perfectly curled lock of hair, and the blue contacts that give Routh an uncanny appearance, like he's a Superman action figure.
The world doesn't need a savior. And neither do I.
It's a movie that has nothing but nostalgia for Reeve, and just 2 years after the legendary actor died, you can feel the sense of yearning for a big-screen Superman, though Singer's romantic version is usually a little too outstretched, with long periods of nothing really happening. And neither Lois Lane nor Lex Luthor actually coming face-to-face with the Man of Steel until past the hour mark and nearly 2 hours in, respectively. Routh would briefly reprise the role in the CW's Infinite Crisis, a crossover between 5 of its ongoing shows, which made for a nice reminder of how well-suited he could have been in a better movie. But while Warner Brothers may not have had a hit with its new big-screen Superman, there was actually another Superman flying around, well, running around, on TV at the same time. We're sort of bending the rules a bit to include him, but Tom Welling played a younger version of the Man of Steel for 10 years on Smallville, in the longest build-up to a costume change in recorded history. And since he technically became Superman, it has to count. Like Lois and Clark, the show fit right into the TV landscape of its time, coming off teen dramas like Dawson's Creek, but also genre shows like Buffy and Angel, which allowed it to embrace the more sci-fi and fantasy parts of the Superman mythos. Despite being 24, Welling fit right in as a moody, sensitive high schooler trying to find his place in the world, while fearing how he might bring harm to those around him. He was slightly awkward and kind of angry, but mostly well-meaning, as he became the secret vigilante The Blur, before his eventual transformation in the final episode. Also, it must be said that Smallville has what might be the best on-screen version of Lex Luthor in the form of Michael Rosenbaum.
I'm used to people judging me before they get to know me.
The show featured a number of recognizable Superman characters: Jimmy, Lana, Lois, and of course, a cloud version of Darkseid, as was the style at the time. But it's actually Clark's dynamic with Lex that forms the show's emotional backbone, as a kind of yin and yang, who both save each other in the pilot episode from certain death and obvious Christ imagery, respectively.
Who did this to you?
Welling's withheld version of Clark worked up to a point in a story about a young man hiding from the world, and he also got to flex his dramatic chops on occasion.
I'm so sorry for what I did.
Your actions have consequences, Clark.
But apart from a few hints of developing the mild-mannered reporter persona, Welling's Clark doesn't change all that much over the show's 10-year period, which might usually work for a fully formed Man of Steel, but makes him a little less interesting in an extended origin. On the other hand, a more modern interpretation dived right into Superman's story just a few years later and came achingly close to getting it right. You can debate endlessly about whether a dour adaptation of Superman is the way to go, but there was a lot riding on Henry Cavill as the Man of Steel in a post-Avengers world. With DC looking to set up its own Marvel-style universe, it didn't exactly pan out, but Cavill himself flirted with being a great choice for the iconic character. There's a lot of noise in Man of Steel, a lot of chaos and a lot of scowls, but in the midst of it all, Cavill's Superman has hints of a calming presence, making him the kind of superhero that fits Zack Snyder's benevolent God interpretation.
I can do things that other people can't.
That interpretation gets a bit literal at times and can lean a bit too heavily on the angry Greek deity side of things, as well as some overt Christ imagery, but there's probably some version of Cavill's Superman that works perfectly in a different take on the DC mythology that isn't bogged down by nihilism.
What was I supposed to do? Just let him die?
Maybe.
The sequel, Batman v Superman, would double down on the misery, presenting a drone strike version Superman who doesn't seem particularly happy about helping people. That is, when he would help people at all. But the bigger problem is that his Superman ends up so full of rage that even the movie's nightmare scenes and the character's eventual mindless resurrection in Justice League don't end up all that different from his usual scowling default setting. While we don't ever really see a Clark Kent that's any different from his Man of Steel, we do eventually get hints of what a bright, sunny Superman played by Cavill might have looked like. But by the time he shows up 3 movies deep, it's a little too late for this version, despite the last-minute attempt to go back to the character's roots.
Not impressed.
Most people have not heard of Kirk Allen, but his 1948 theatrical serial and its 1950 sequel were pivotal to getting Superman to the silver screen in live-action form. The first flesh-and-blood actor to play him at the movies, Allen nails the mild-mannered reporter side of Clark Kent right from his first scene with the character's parents.
My real parents couldn't have done more for me.
And he even embodies Superman's powers, like X-ray vision and super hearing, in delightfully silly ways.
But my hearing is a little better than average.
Much like George Reeves, Allen's Superman usually goes up against more grounded villains, who he defeats by bonking their heads together.
All right, where's Luthor and Miss Lane?
There's also a clear difference between his Clark and his Superman, who's often animated by hand when he flies. And while his pantomime physical performance may not be what we'd expect in the modern era, Alan's impishness, enthusiasm, and graceful exaggerations create a Superman who delights in leaping out of windows and in maintaining the ruse of a man with a double life. A man who changes in the Daily Planet's filing room multiple times per episode.
Superman.
But what's especially fascinating about Alan's work is how he perfectly nails the character's vocal transformation, even during a single line.
This looks like a job for Superman.
It's an underrated aspect of the character, and very few live-action actors actually nailed it to the degree that Alan did. In fact, the only early Superman to outdo him is our next honorable mention. We're sticking with live-action performances for this list, but there's no way to talk about early Superman without discussing voice actor Bud Collyer. He was the first actor to give Superman a voice in his very first non-comic adaptation, the decade-long radio serial The Adventures of Superman, which began in 1941.
That's a wonderful story, Lois.
Thanks, Clark, but I owe it all to Superman.
And he also voiced the Man of Steel in not only the 9 iconic cartoon episodes of Fleischer Studios' Superman produced between 1941 and 42, but the New Adventures of Superman, which ran for 4 seasons until 1970. As the voice behind Superman and Clark Kent for 30 years, he's a vital part of the character's history, even though we can't technically give him a slot here, but his influence can be felt all across our top 3 entries. As the newest Superman on our list, there's still plenty of time for David Corenswet to rise or fall in our rankings, but we feel pretty confident with what we've seen.
Hey, buddy. Eyes up here.
James Gunn's Superman flies by a little too quickly to really dive into the character, but in every single scene, Corenswet gives us hints of a fully formed Clark/Superman 3 years into his public career.
Crypto! What the hey, dude?
He's a fast-talking, aw shucks kind of guy who exudes a lovable energy, and while we haven't spent enough time with his awkward, good-natured Clark Kent just yet, the actor slips effortlessly into both modes, mild-mannered and Man of Steel.
Miss Lane.
He's vulnerable, and he has a sense of humor.
Quit messing around!
I'm not messing around. I'm doing important stuff.
And one of his defining traits is that he's a dog person. Very few adaptations outside of the cartoons have really touched on this part of him, but it makes perfect sense, since Superman is kind of what you'd get if you turned a golden retriever into a person, at least earlier in his career. But there's really only one live-action version that's explored what Superman's life would be like if he'd stuck around for a long time. Right from his first scenes in the CW's Supergirl, Tyler Hoechlin nails the mood and mannerisms of both sides of the Man of Steel, but it's really his own series, Superman and Lois, a show full of gumshoe journalism, that allows him to truly shine.
Cool costume.
Thanks. My mom made it for me.
The series doesn't cross over with the others in the Arrowverse, but it uses the classic iconography of Superman to present a new take on Smallville as a contemporary American town suffering a post-recession economic downturn, making it the perfect modern update. Superman and Lois Lane have teenage sons, and when they move from Metropolis back to Kansas, Clark starts bearing the brunt of living a double life and gradually reveals himself to his neighbors over the course of 4 seasons.
You told your girlfriend? He didn't, I did.
All the while, the show tells the story of Superman learning and at times struggling to be a good father, something the comics have focused on a lot in recent years. Along the way, the character is shown to be worldly, a protector of the vulnerable and innocent, and someone trustworthy on the surface, but struggling with living up to this ideal since his secret identity involves lying to those around him.
Maybe this is doing more harm than good.
Despite its villain of the week structure, what makes Superman and Lois work is its focus on friends and family, which it frames as Superman's biggest strength.
You will never hurt another person.
Well, that and, of course, punching. Hoechlin has a righteous anger, and as a father, he's stern but never cruel.
I'll find a way. Dad, this is not up for debate.
Ultimately, he's a jovial, loving, and forgiving person who struggles with what it means to love and to be mortal, but without losing sight of his humanity in the process.
I came to this world alone. But when I left it, I had so much.
This humanity is what makes Superman who he is, and the various actors who've played him across the decades have all understood that to varying degrees. But there's one person who stands head and shoulders above them all as history's definitive Superman, and the gold standard for the big screen superhero. There's a lot of debate about what the American way means in the 20th and 21st centuries, but it's hard not to look up to the version Christopher Reeve believed in when describing his thoughts on Superman, something that's still relevant today.
In this high-tech urban nightmare landscape that we've got, of people feeling isolated and alone, they don't know their neighbors, they don't know who's next to them, they're afraid of other people in the street. Life is very overwhelming. The idea that early American value of a friend who's there when you need him is the key to the whole character.
Richard Donner's Superman the movie added a lot to what we think of as Superman's story, from his iconic S logo being the crest of the House of El to the ice crystal version of the Fortress of Solitude seen in nearly every adaptation since. But more than any of that, it was the perfect balance that Reeve struck between a bumbling, warm-hearted, vulnerable Clark Kent and a firm but welcoming and slightly flirtatious Man of Steel.
Do you have a girlfriend?
No, I don't, but if I did, Miss Lane, you'd be the first to know about it.
Even the way he differentiates Clark and Superman's postures ended up becoming part of some of the character's most iconic comic moments. Reeve was an incredible actor, but a huge part of the film's success also rests on Margot Kidder as the ideal Lois Lane. She's the perfect, strong-headed foil to Reeves' timid Clark.
All right.
People may be nostalgic about this film today, but Superman the movie was already filled with nostalgia by the time it came out in 1978. The Lois-Clark dynamic is a perfect throwback to screwball comedies from Hollywood's golden age, and its folksy Norman Rockwell Smallville was a fantasy of some lost American virtue that, whether or not it truly existed, was fully captured by Superman himself, even in the series' later, goofy entries. Reeve embodied the character both on and off screen with his disability activism in later years, but his performance is arguably the reason there are still superhero movies today, with each one of them trying to live up to the unquantifiable magic he brought to the screen, the kind that could make you believe a man could fly, which is why he takes the top spot in our search for the definitive Superman. He was one of a kind.
I'll see you later.